The rain had been falling all day, that relentless Scottish drizzle that seeps into your bones no matter how thick your coat is. Jacob pulled his hood tighter as he crossed Cowgate, the slick cobblestones reflecting the glow of the yellow street lamps. Edinburgh was beautiful in its own eerie way. Grey stone buildings looming above narrow closes, shadowed staircases that seemed to twist endlessly upward, and the feeling that you were walking on centuries of buried secrets. Jacob was a student at the university, but he wasn't heading home. He had promised his friend Aidan he'd meet him in a pub near Grassmarket. It was late, though, and Jacob wasn't entirely sure if Aidan had been serious. Still, the thought of a pint and warmth drove him through the rain. He turned into a close, a tight alleyway running beneath an arch of ancient brick. His phone buzzed in his pocket. No signal. Again. Edinburgh's closes were notorious for dead zones, like the stone itself resisted the modern world. He pushed on, footsteps echoing off damp walls. Then he heard something else. Another set of footsteps, just behind him. Jacob slowed, glancing over his shoulder. Nobody. Just the sheen of water on the cobbles and the oppressive drizzle. He picked up his pace, but so did the steps. Faster. Closer. The sound of wet shoes slapping against stone. Heart hammering, he ducked into a side close, winding upward through a narrow staircase. The steps followed, always just a breath behind. By the time he reached the top, gasping, he found himself in a tiny courtyard, walled in on all sides. No exit. When he looked down, the footsteps had stopped. Silence. Rain. And then, a whisper. A single word carried on the damp air. Jacob. Jacob didn't wait to find out more. He bolted down another passage, stumbling back onto Grassmarket, where the noise of pubs and laughter seemed absurd after what he'd just experienced. He slipped inside the first pub he found, shaking with cold and nerves. Aidan was nowhere to be seen. Jacob ordered a drink, hands trembling, and tried to rationalize it. Someone messing around. His own imagination. Edinburgh was a city of stories, ghost tours, tales of body snatchers, executions. Maybe he was just primed to hear voices in the rain. By the time he left the pub an hour later, the rain had turned heavier. The streets were quieter now. He walked past Greyfriars Kirkyard, the iron gates locked, the gravestones just visible in the glow of street lamps. He tried not to look, but something drew his eyes upward. One of the darkened tenement windows above the kirkyard was lit faintly from within, though the glass was misted with condensation, and in that oval of light, pressed against the glass, was a pale face. It was watching him. Jacob froze. The face wasn't moving, just staring, lips parted as if caught mid-breath. Then, without warning, the light flickered out, plunging the window into blackness. A cold shiver ran through him. He hurried on, shoes splashing through puddles, his hood pulled tight. But the feeling stayed with him, the certainty that the face was still there, still watching, even though he couldn't see it any more. When he reached his flat and slammed the door behind him, Jacob forced a laugh at his own fear. He peeled off his wet clothes, made tea, and tried to shake it off. But as he sat on his bed, scrolling absently through his phone, a sound rose from the street below. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. And then, 3 taps against his window. Jacob jerked upright, his mug toppling and spilling tea across the floor. His window overlooked a deserted street. Nobody was there. Just rain coursing down the glass. He stayed awake most of the night, the anxiety refusing to let him rest. At dawn, he convinced himself it had all been stress and exhaustion. Edinburgh was an old city. It played tricks on you. He went to class, forcing himself through the day. That evening, the storm worsened. Jacob walked home through Princes Street, wind whipping umbrellas inside out. That's when he noticed the man. He was dressed in a long black coat, holding a perfectly upright umbrella. Unlike everyone else battling the wind, the man's umbrella didn't bend or twist. He walked slowly, steadily, and always a few paces behind Jacob. Jacob stopped at a crossing, pretending to check his phone. The man stopped too, tilting his umbrella just enough that Jacob couldn't see his face. Jacob turned sharply down Hanover Street. The man followed. He ducked into another close. The man entered too, his footsteps measured, echoing. Jacob sprinted through the twisting passage until he burst into daylight again, chest heaving. The man was gone. But when Jacob finally reached his flat and turned the key, his blood ran cold. Inside, propped neatly against the wall by his door, was a dripping black umbrella. Jacob barely slept, every creak in the building making him jolt awake. By morning, the umbrella was gone. He told himself it had to be a prank, maybe Aidan, maybe someone from class. He tried to confront Aidan at the library, but his friend frowned. "What umbrella? Mate, you've been acting jumpy for days." That night, Jacob couldn't face his empty flat. He wandered the old town aimlessly, letting the rain soak him. Tourists were clustered on ghost tours, laughing nervously as guides spun tales of Burke and Hare, of witches, of Mackenzie's poltergeist. Jacob kept walking, avoiding people, until he found himself in an unfamiliar close. It was narrower than most, the walls almost touching. The rain seemed not to fall there, the air unnaturally still. He walked deeper, his footsteps echoing. At the end was a wooden door, swollen with damp. He pushed it open. Beyond it was not another street, but a stone staircase spiraling down. He descended, heart pounding, until he emerged into a vast, dim chamber, old stone arches, dripping water, the smell of earth. He knew stories of the underground vaults beneath Edinburgh, but this felt older, deeper. And then he heard it. Footsteps. The same deliberate steps as before, approaching from the darkness. The black umbrella leaned neatly against the wall. "Jacob!" The whisper came again, closer now. He turned and bolted, sprinting back up the stairs, lungs burning. But when he burst out into the night, he wasn't in Edinburgh anymore. The clothes behind him had vanished. The city around him was empty, silent, every window dark. Only the rain remained. And somewhere, behind him, the steady sound of footsteps growing closer.